He watched her from the corner of the library, his heartbeat syncing with the quiet rustle of turning pages. Every time she smiled at something in the book she held, he felt a warmth spread through his chest. A warmth that had no name, no promise, and yet it lived in him like a heartbeat he could never silence. She never noticed him. Or maybe she did, in those small, fleeting glances that felt too quick to hold on to. But he noticed everything, the way her fingers traced underlined sentences, how her eyes softened when she read something she loved, and the quiet sigh she released before closing the book, like she was leaving a world behind. He knew then she was the kind of person who could love deeply, silently, and forever. What he didn't know was that silence would become the language of their love, a love that would remain unspoken, yet never die. He met her in their first year of college, during a group project neither of them wanted to do. Her name was Arwa, a name that felt like poetry, something you whispered softly just to see if it could echo. He, Adil, was quiet by nature, someone who preferred books to people, and words written rather than spoken. But Arwa was light in motion, confident, curious, alive. She had this way of making ordinary things feel significant. The way she laughed made him forget his own name sometimes. She talked about life as if she was trying to taste every second of it. Their conversations began with shared assignments, then stretched into late-night study sessions, and eventually into moments that felt too fragile to define. She would talk, he would listen, and somewhere between her words and his silence, something beautiful began to grow. An invisible thread that neither of them dared to touch. Adil wrote about her in his journal, pages filled with things he could never say aloud. The way her hair caught the sunlight, how she bit her lip when thinking, the quiet sadness in her eyes when she thought no one noticed. He saw all of it, memorized all of it, loved all of it. But he never told her, because sometimes silence feels safer than truth. One evening as they walked back from class, rain began to fall. Gentle at first, then fierce and relentless. They ran for cover under an old banyan tree. She was laughing, her clothes soaked, her hair clinging to her face. And for a moment, Adil thought he'd never seen anything more alive. She caught him staring. Her laughter faded and something unspoken passed between them. A question, a possibility, a heartbeat's worth of courage. He wanted to tell her then, everything, how he woke up thinking of her, how her voice lingered even after she was gone, how he felt incomplete when she wasn't around, but his words froze somewhere between his heart and his lips, and in that hesitation, the moment slipped away. She smiled gently, like she understood everything he couldn't say, and whispered, "You're a good friend, Adil." He smiled back. That was the night he learned that love, when unspoken, can still feel infinite. Years passed. They graduated, life pulled them in different directions. Arwa moved abroad for work. Adil stayed, teaching literature at the same university where their story began. He told his students about the power of words, even as he carried the ache of the ones he never spoke. He followed her life from a distance, through the rare updates on social media, the photos of cities she explored, the smile that never changed. She looked happy, and that was enough. At least, that's what he told himself. Then one winter evening he received a message. It was from her. "Hey stranger, I'm in town for a few days. Coffee?" He read it again and again, unsure if his heart could handle seeing her. But he said yes. Of course he said yes. When she walked into the cafe, it was as if time bowed in silence. She looked the same, yet different. Softer, wiser, carrying stories in her eyes that he longed to hear. They talked for hours, filling the spaces between years with laughter and quiet nostalgia. She told him about her travels, her dreams, and her failed engagement, a relationship that ended not with anger but silence. "He was a good man," she said softly. "But he never really saw me." Adil wanted to say, "I always did." But he didn't. He just listened, the way he always had. When it was time to leave, they stood at the cafe door, neither wanting to say goodbye. The air between them trembled with everything they hadn't said. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You never changed, Adil," she whispered. "Maybe I did," he replied quietly, "just not in ways you could see." They walked out together but went their separate ways at the corner, like two parallel lines, close but never touching. A few weeks later, he received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a handwritten letter. It was from her. "I don't know why I'm writing this," it began, "maybe because I never said what I should have. I always felt something between us, quiet but real. Maybe we were both too afraid to name it. Maybe that's why it still lingers. I'm leaving again tomorrow, but I want you to know you mattered. More than I ever said." He read it until the ink blurred. For the first time in years, he cried. Not out of sadness, but release. She had spoken the words he never could, and somehow that was enough. Months turned into years. They never met again, but every time it rained, Adil walked to that old banyan tree, closed his eyes and felt her laughter in the wind. He grew older, his hair turning silver, his hands trembling as he turned the pages of the same books she once held. And though life moved on, a part of him remained suspended in that one silent heartbeat under the rain, where love was pure and words were unnecessary. When he died, his students found his old journal. Inside were hundreds of pages, each beginning with her name. The last entry read, "Some loves are not meant to be spoken. They are meant to be felt, quietly, deeply, forever." And somewhere far away, in a city filled with noise, Arwa sat by her window as rain began to fall. She closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek, and whispered to the wind, "I felt it too." The storm outside echoed softly against the glass, like a heartbeat that had waited too long to be heard. And in that moment, somewhere between the raindrops and silence, two souls finally spoke, not in words, but in memory, where unspoken love never truly dies. Years passed like fading pages of a forgotten book, yet some memories refused to be erased. For Arwa, life became a series of accomplishments that looked perfect on the outside: promotions, travel, friends who admired her strength. But deep inside she carried an emptiness that no success could fill. It wasn't loneliness, not exactly. It was the ache of something unfinished, something that had existed quietly between two hearts but never found its voice. Every now and then she'd catch herself wondering about Adil, where he was, what he was reading, whether he ever thought of her when it rained. She tried to write to him once, years after that last letter. She sat by her desk, pen trembling over the paper, but all she managed to write was his name before her eyes blurred with tears. It felt impossible. How could a single name carry so much of her life? She folded the paper, never sent it, and tucked it inside an old book they once read together as if she could hide her heart within the pages they both loved. Meanwhile, Adil's name began to fade from the world, but not from memory. His students still spoke of him, the quiet professor who taught them that words are sacred, that silence can sometimes be louder than sound. He had become a mystery to them. A man who lived through the poetry he taught, who spoke of love as if it were a language beyond human speech. Some said he once loved someone so deeply that it changed how he saw the world. None knew her name. When Arwa returned to their city again, it had been more than a decade since they last saw each other. The campus had changed. New buildings, new faces, yet the old banyan tree still stood tall, branches stretching like arms that refused to forget. She stood beneath it, her fingers brushing the rough bark, and memories flooded back with the scent of rain in the air. A student passing by noticed her and smiled politely. "Are you here for Professor Adil's memorial?" Her heart froze. "Memorial?" she whispered, though part of her already knew the answer. "He passed away last year," the student said softly. "He was special. He left behind his journals for the university. They say it's full of letters and poems, all written to someone he never named." That night, Arwa attended the memorial. The auditorium was filled with his students, colleagues, and friends, all speaking about the man who had changed their lives with his quiet wisdom. When it was over, one of his former students approached her with an envelope. "He left this with his journals," the young man said. "We thought it might belong to someone named Arwa." Her hands trembled as she took it. Inside was a letter written in his familiar handwriting, fragile but steady. "Arwa, If you're reading this, it means I've finally found peace in a place where silence no longer hurts. I spent a lifetime teaching words, yet the ones I most wanted to say always stayed within me. You are my poem, the kind that doesn't need to be recited to exist. I hope you've lived fully, laughed loudly, and loved deeply. But if a part of your heart still lingers in what we never said, know that mine stayed there too. Some souls don't need promises to belong, they just do. She pressed the letter to her heart, tears falling freely for the first time in years. For the rest of her life she carried that letter with her, not as a reminder of loss but as proof that love doesn't vanish simply because it goes unspoken. It lives in gestures, in quiet moments, in the spaces between words. In the years that followed, she often visited the university, sometimes sitting under the banyan tree with a book open on her lap. Students would pass by, whispering about the elegant woman who came every Sunday and read silently under the same tree where their late professor once sat. None of them knew that beneath her calm smile lived an entire lifetime of love, invisible, unbroken, eternal. One evening, as the sun set behind the old buildings, a gentle rain began to fall. Arwa closed her eyes, feeling each drop like a memory returning home. In that hush of twilight she whispered his name, not to summon him back, but to thank him for teaching her what love truly meant. Love, she realized, isn't always about confession or forever. Sometimes it's about two souls who recognize each other, walk side by side for a while, and then let life carry them in different directions, still connected by an invisible thread. As she stood to leave, a young couple passed by, laughing, running through the rain just as she and Adil once had. She smiled, seeing a reflection of her past, of everything she had felt and lost and finally understood. She turned one last time toward the banyan tree, the same place where their silence had begun, and whispered, "We spoke, Adil, just not with words." The rain answered with a soft rhythm, like applause from the heavens, gentle, eternal, unspoken. And in that moment, she knew that some loves never fade, they simply change form, finding new ways to exist, in memories, in stories, and in the quiet spaces where two hearts once met and never truly let go.